Hello everyone, welcome to JavaScript Days. Our talk is called Playwright in Action, from setup to best practices. And with me is Stefan. Stefan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, Max. Hello, audience. I'm Stefan. I'm based in Berlin, like Max is, and I'm doing Playwright end-to-end stuff now for multiple years. I'm also a Playwright ambassador, and I'm convinced that Playwright is a stellar tool to end-to-end test and cover all your applications. And I'm super excited to talk about all the goodness that you, Max, and team are shipping these days.
Thank you so much, Stefan. And I'm Max. I'm working in the Playwright team since almost 3 years. And yes, we are both based in Berlin. So let's get started. So for all of you who don't know yet, Playwright, what is it? Playwright is reliable end-to-end testing for modern web apps. So nowadays, if you are working on a web application, right, you are adding a lot of features, but at some point you're adding like some of the features and you might break some of the features which you shipped half a year ago. And to prevent that from happening, you do testing, right? But there are two kinds of testing, either manual testing, which means you go through all of the features of your web application by hand before release. But that's really time consuming, right, Stefan?
100%. And especially when you have complex applications, for example, you have to cover 10, 12, 15 cases, even developing the things and clicking all the different edge cases through it. Automation can be a huge help to speed up development, but also keep the quality high.
Exactly. So back in short story, back in the days when I was working at some other company, we were working on a huge web application, and then we decided we want to release, and it took us sometimes, I believe, 2 or 3 days in order to just manually test through all the features. Yes.
And then find a bug fix and start all over again, right? It's
yes,
just
exactly.
Too much time.
Exactly. And the solution for that is automated testing, and this is what Playwright offers. So automated testing means everything what you can do with your mouse or your keyboard, Playwright can do in an API programmatic matter. So yes, let's go over some of the features and highlights. So Playwright is a browser automation framework for any browser. So you can automate Chromium-based browsers like Microsoft Edge, Google Chrome, or Firefox. And Firefox. And you can also automate like WebKit. WebKit is the foundation for Safari. We work on any common platform. So this means like Linux, like Ubuntu and Debian, Windows, obviously, and macOS. And we have one API. So ideally, you write your test once and it passes in all of the 3 browser engines, or it fails if your web application has a bug. So yes. And we have full isolation. So this is also a huge difference to other end-to-end testing frameworks. So one test can never break some other test, only if you change something inside the state of your web application. And we are fast because like we don't need to relaunch all the browsers over and over again. We have browser context. And we have powerful tooling. We will go into that more detail later on, which brings you a nice developer experience. And last but not least, we have multi-language. Here on the right side, you see our GitHub repository. So Playwright is fully open source. As of today, we have almost 60,000 stars on GitHub and 3,000 forks. And yes. So regarding multi-language, Playwright is available on TypeScript and JavaScript. This is what we're going to focus today. And we are also available in Python, .NET, and Java. So yes, we said powerful tooling. Our most powerful tooling is the Visual Studio Code extension. This is the best and easiest way of getting started with Playwright. It enables you to create a new project, write tests, generate tests, run them and debug them from Visual Studio Code, our most beloved code editor nowadays. Here on the right side, you see the extension with almost 500,000 downloads, and this is what we're going to use. Yes, so this was VS Code extension. Let's start with one of the fundamentals about like locating elements. And locating elements is essential to understand for Playwright because it's like different to how other tools are solving it. And Stefan, maybe you can explain them the difference of what a locator is and why a locator is better than just executing some JavaScript or so.
Yeah, so when I started using Playwright, I had to figure out, first of all, you have to familiarize yourself with what UI testing or end-to-end testing is, right? Most of the time, it's pretty much just finding an element, right, and doing something with it, and then waiting for something else, right? in Playwright, the foundation for all of these are these locators. And now for a little bit, Playwright and you and team brought in these get by locators. And these are pretty much like a blueprint, like a definition of an element that is eventually maybe in the DOM. So when you call, for example, like it's written there in the first line, locator equals page get by role button, it is pretty much just defining that you want to locate this element. And then you combine your locators with actions or assertions, which we will have a look at later, to kind of figure out if your web application is doing what it's supposed to. And then you can see some Playwright magic happening, and we will cover that a little bit later in the demo.
Awesome. So yes, that were locators. And let's get started with our demo. We will look at locators in a bit again. So immediately inside code. And let me move to Visual Studio Code.
So how do we get started, Max, from our most beloved editor?
So yes, here, Playwright test for VS Code. This is our extension. I got it installed. And what I have open here is a folder. And the folder has nothing inside. And the easiest way of getting started is by saying install Playwright. Install Playwright is a command we expose in Visual Studio Code. And you can invoke commands based on the operating system with Shift Command and P. And let's just call it. And this asks you already like the most important question, right? The project you want to work on, in which browser engine do you want to test it, right? We support 3 browser engines. We want to test it in all, because we want to cover all of our users. And let's just stick with the other defaults. Note also here the GitHub Actions question, which was asked, right? GitHub Actions nowadays is one of the most common CI providers. So if you want to run something on each push inside your GitHub repository, this is the right tool to use. We will go into some demo later as well. So yes.
So what was happening now in the background? I see the terminal popped up, even though we're in VS Code. What was happening?
So essentially what we did was we created a project, right? It was asking for some questions. And then in the background, this command was invoked. And this command is an internal command, but it's essentially just a wrapper around creating some files, which we have here on the left side, and installing Playwright and the browsers and on Linux the dependencies, yes.
The normal NPM dance, right?
Dance, yes.
What files did we get now?
So here, the first file which we got was like the GitHub workflow. We will take a look at it later on. But the most important file is here the test directory with the example spec.ts. And here the normal NPM files, package log, and package.json, and some Playwright config. Let's close the terminal so we will have a little bit more space. And here we essentially see already 2 tests. And let's go over it. So a test in Playwright is essentially just a function call, and it might look familiar to you because like a lot of JavaScript test runners have this way of defining a test, right? By calling like this test function. And the first argument is like the test title. So in this case, we have 2 tests, has title here, and get started link. And I said before, everything what you can do with your browser, you can do with Playwright. So the first thing we are going to do is we want to go to some website, right? In this case, we will go to playwright.dev. And later on, we want to make sure that the title has a specific, that the page has a specific title. And this expect might also look familiar to you, Stefan. Have you used it before? Like.
For sure. When I started using Playwright, I felt immediately at home, right? Like you mentioned, this is very common syntax from libraries like unit testing libraries like Jest or other frameworks that are very familiar in the JavaScript ecosystem. But what surprised me initially was a little bit that because we're doing normal JavaScript here, right? This code looks very, very synchronous, but there are a lot of asynchronous and awaits happening, right? So what is actually going on here with our Playwright magic?
So what I did before, right? We like this was there before. This is like our special expect, how I call it. This is like the way how Playwright does expects, and these are like called web first assertions. And the huge difference to them compared to like normal expects, which you see in other test runners, like here, for example, is that Playwright in the background will retry them over and over again until a condition is met. In this case, that the page here has a specific title, or the timeout is reached. And the timeout by default is, I believe, in this case, like 5 seconds. And before, like you might did something like this before. So you just did a normal expect without await. Note the difference here is in the keyword of await. And you were just passing the title to it, and then you were checking the to-be value. So yes, so this is not recommended because this is not retrying, right? And retrying is what you want to do in order to avoid flakiness, because like imagine you have an online shop, for example, and some product detail page. And the product detail page in the URL has just an ID, for example. And when you try to navigate to this website, imagine it's a SPA, I believe, a single page application. It will need to do some background request to the web server to get the product title and the product name for this product, right? So we will navigate to it. It would, in the background, fetch the product title, and then later on it would just update the title. So if you would do this, in a lot of cases, it would just fail initially. You would have to add like a wage page for timeout and then some random value, but that's not something which is recommended, because imagine a network is slow on Thursdays, it might be 2,000 instead of 1,000, right? So never ever do this, always do this, because this retries over and over again.
Yeah, when I discovered how you folks envision UI testing, right? You always have to keep in mind what you want to do is you want to wait for an element and you want to reach the UI to have another state, right? You're just looking for UI state pretty much, right? And when you're dealing with expect, like we do here, you have to be aware, or honestly, it took me a while, but once I understood it and was like, oh, this is so cool, right? Because line 7 just works. You don't have to care about implementation details. Similar to this is not only an assertion topic, right? If you go, for example, to line 18, where we click a button, this will also wait for this button to be there. So you don't have to manually query the DOM. It's like, oh, I need to wait for this network to happen and this URL to come. No, you should just care for this button to be there and click it. And this streamlines the entire topic of end-to-end testing so much that I don't have to have the headache of, oh, how do I figure out when something is there? Because Playwright does all this stuff for me. And I think it's very beautiful.
Absolutely, absolutely. So as you said, test like a user sees things instead of testing and waiting for the implementation detail, right? You could rethink this also, like what I just said means instead of like doing page.locate or some XPath or some CSS selector, we instead say get by role of any link on the page with the text get started. This is what the user sees, right? A link for the user is most of the times some text which is getting underlined when he hovers over it, right? That's a link. And with the text getting started, and then we later on click it.
Yeah. 100%. When I first discovered these accessibility or UXy first locators, I honestly was a little bit skeptical because they are more verbose, right? I could just grab an ID or something, but very often depends on the relationship that you have with the development team. Maybe you're the developer yourself, right? But if you figure out, or if you base your end-to-end tests on UX and accessibility first, you will find so many issues that just make your application so much better. Because if you cannot find a user first or an accessibility first locator, well, then there's something to fix. And I think this is just another area or another way how end-to-end testing in Playwright just pushes for better web development. And I'm all game for these kind of things.
100%. So using these get by role selectors is essentially like accessibility testing, or partly accessibility testing as a drive-by while you write your end-to-end tests.
Yeah. So we now have here two tests, right? They look fairly familiar, right? We're checking for title, and then we're checking if a heading is visible. How can we run this?
Let me just run it. So what the Playwright extension offers you is this green triangle here. And you can just click it. Let me first remove this not recommended logic. And then let's just run it and see what happens. So what happens now in the background is that Playwright gets invoked for running this test, and each of these statements get evaluated. And then we will get some duration here, how long it took. And in this case, it passed. Nice. And it was green, but there was no browser. Where is the browser, Stefan? What happened to the browser?
Well, I think what you did here is you've run our two quick test cases in headless mode. I would love to see some action on screen, though. So how could I see what is actually happening?
All right. To see the browser in VS Code, let me move this a little bit here to the right. It's as easy as saying show browser. And it's here a checkbox inside the testing tab of VS Code. You will also see all your tests here in some kind of tree structure. So let me fold this back again and let's run it. And what this gives us is the browser. And the browser were ended here and stayed open from the last test state. So in this case, we were just navigating to Playwright Dev, and then we were checking of the title. So essentially, we stayed on the same page, right? Quite boring. This test is a little bit more involved. So if you click on it, it will first go to Playwright Dev, click on the first getting started link, and then it will navigate to docs intro.
Yeah, I found this particularly helpful. So we now have two example tests, right, that have 2 or 3 instructions. But when you're dealing with an entire end-to-end flow, that includes probably hundreds of steps like clicking buttons, adding products, logging in, logging out, all these kind of things, it is so helpful to kind of follow along, see what's happening. But I think the real beauty of VS Code actually comes in when you start debugging things. How could we debug what is actually going on here right now?
Let's maybe let's try to debug this thing here maybe. Like I want to see what's going on. So debugging in VS Code with Playwright is very common to all the JavaScript developers out there because it's essentially reusing the normal JavaScript debugging. So we will just right click here and say debug, and this will start or initiate a normal debugging session in VS Code. So you have your variables here, you have your watch, you have your call stack, and it will give you a little bit more goodies. Like it will, for example, give you the goodie of when you hover over things here on the right side, it will select the elements on the left side. So as you can see, I'm hovering over this get by role selector on the right side, and on the left side of the screen, the getting started button is essentially selected, and a little bit down below there's the locator of the element.
This is so helpful, honestly, right? Because locating elements in a hefty web application, we're looking here right now at the Playwright docs, right? But sometimes you have hundreds of buttons, 50 products, and then figuring out, okay, what is my test actually looking for? I found myself just tabbing along the test pretty much most of the time, because this is where a lot of errors come from, that you're matching the wrong elements. And this is just a very nice goodie in the debug view.
100%. So we can just step over more things here, and we clicked on the element, we navigated, and here it's again highlighting, in this case, installation, the heading installation, because we are like here having an, let me make this, put me to the left side. So we are now here at the last step. We will awaiting the expect that it has a heading with the text installation, and it's highlighting it. And here it's another web first assertion, right? We previously didn't talk about it, but we have these assertions not only here on the page instance, we also have them here on the locator instances. So you have to be visible, to be enabled, to be disabled, and all these kind of assertions. So
and these are waiting, right? These are similar to the Playwright approach. Just describe your UI and wait for it.
Yes, exactly. So what about maybe extending this test a little bit more? Like we are saying here that a heading with installation is visible. Let me try to pick an element maybe.
Let's do it.
So another feature Playwright for VS Code here offers is this pick locator feature. You get it in the testing tab, and you can just click here, pick locator. And what this offers you is one part of our feature we call Playwright Code Gen. We'll go into the detailed code chain later on, but this locator picker here will, like, over all the elements you hover over, you will get a Playwright accessible for like a role-based selector, or we try to find the best selector for the specific element. Let's call it like that. And we are on the intro page, so let's maybe try to create, or let's try to get a selector for this PNPM tab. Let's just click on it, and in VS Code we will have it right there. Let's move it over here.
This is the perfect flow when you're really in the nitty-gritty of debugging and writing your test code, right? You don't have to interrupt your session, first of all, and then you get the help to continue or adjust your tests right in your editor. And this just helps you to keep rolling, right? Without restarting everything and finding the same state again. And I'm using this pick locator all the time too.
Nice. So yeah, that's why we added it to VS Code. So you can immediately create locators of the either like during your test run while you're debugging it, or also like afterwards when the browser is still open. So let's get out of this test run maybe and start writing our first tests.
Can I do that from VS Code too?
Yes, you can. So yes, obviously just copy a new file, call it example2, and then close it, remove all the stuff. And then you would have to do page dot something. But do you need to learn all these things, Stefan?
I think you have a solution at your fingertips for me to really get started with things that are not the Playwright docs. So what is the quickest way to get started?
So the easiest way of getting started is again here inside this testing tab. All the goodies are there, and it's called record new. Record new, let's just click it and see what happens. So record new will give you two things. First, in VS Code, it will give you a new file, in this case test-1 spec.ts, with some recording text inside. The Playwright code gen is recording. And on the left side, you will get, like before, a browser window. And the magic happens now when you start interacting with this browser window. So to which website should we go?
Let's stick with the Playwright docs, and let's see how we can extend it.
All right, so I navigated to the Playwright Dev website, and inside VS Code here, it added a page go to automatically. But that's not a lot of magic yet, right? So let's maybe try to click on things. Where should we click on?
Let's click first of all on the headline maybe, and then on the search, and then let's all just do the search. And let's search for locators.
Locators.
All right, let's click locators. And what could we look for? Do we just want to look for quick guide to see if we have the quick guide in there?
We could maybe let's add an assertion so that the quick guide is on the page. Maybe someone would remove it. Like we always want to make sure that the quick guide is still there, right?
Can I add assertions here now too?
Yes, since like I believe 3 or 4 Playwright versions, like less than half a year ago, we added the capabilities of adding assertions. So here at the top, you can decide either between assert visibility, assert text, or assert value. So assert value would be for an input box or a text area, and assert text for just making sure that the text is on the page, or assert visibility that a specific text is inside this locator. In this case, I believe assert text is the right thing. So let's just do quick guide. And we want to make sure that assert that the element contains text quick guide. Let's apply that here. And here in VS Code, it created an expect statement with page locator quick guide to contain text quick guide. That's not super ideal. Let's maybe do the other way around. So we do assert visibility instead. What this will do, we will see it right here. It will add a different one. It will add expect page get by road heading, right? Much better with quick guide and to be visible.
Yeah, the first one, I think to be visible is good enough, right? Because we're checking if the text is on the page by looking for the name property, right? Yeah. Could we now change the name property to something more shorter?
Yes. So this starts the discussion of like, should you always use CodeGen to write your tests? Absolutely. But on the other hand, you should always go over each line we generated, right? And try to either optimize it or just maybe think about if you can refactor it, make it a little bit more readable by either extracting variable names, etc. Maybe you're using some sort of patterns like the page object models, right? And you need to rewrite it for POMs afterwards. But yeah, let's maybe finish with CodeChat first. I believe we are done here. Let's maybe cancel.
Yeah.
So cancel will stop CodeChat, and let me open, make this full screen again, and let's refactor this. So we want to remove this. We want to remove that. And
why were we able to shorten the name property here? It was written direct linked or something. Why does that work?
So in this case, like we at Playwright in our coaching, we tried our best, right, to find a name property, but in this case, it kind of failed because like we use too much text, and very often you want to use much less text in order to actually assert the element you're looking for. Like imagine a perfect example is when you go to GitHub, to a repository, and you want to click on issues. I think by default it will give you issues with the issue number, but you're often not interested in that, so you can always remove the number and click just on issues. So
and name is substringing, right?
Yes. So by default it's always contains.
Gotcha.
So let's move this to the right side again and try to execute it. Oof, that was fast.
But I think I'm demoing this quite a few times, right? And I think it's just beautiful that you can click around. You get now what do we have here? 6 lines of JavaScript that make a browser do stuff and tell me that things work. And this is really just a beautiful experience. So I can only second what you just said. CodeChat is the way to go, right? Even when you're debugging tests, just start recording. Playwright gives you the best it can do, then have another look and you can call it a day.
Yes, absolutely. So Playwright is, or let's call it like end-to-end testing, is often also like underrated, because like for a lot of people, these kind of 5 lines, right? They will maybe like just look super minimal, but in reality, they are testing so many things, right? Even like this page navigation here, it's testing that your web server is correct, that the load balancer maybe is correct, that the CDN works properly. And then the search component for all these front-end people out there, it's not something which is just happening on our side, right? In this case, we are using Algolia. So we are testing a third-party service. We check that the integration works, that the authentication works. And for us, we do this, actually, we use something similar actually to always ensure that the search works for our users.
Yeah, 100%. And because the barrier is fairly low, right? Record the stuff and start covering a little bit of functionality in your web apps, whatever it might be. If I think, for example, you brought up third parties. Third parties are a wonderful reason to start end-to-end testing, because this is stuff that breaks without you doing anything, right? But if you have only 1, 2, 3, 5 end-to-end tests that cover your basic flows, your essential flows, that includes all the third parties that you have, that is beautiful. Another example that I know about, sometimes you have some third-party JavaScript that is just failing or blocking or breaking your page, right? Yeah. And you don't know about it. If you have end-to-end tests that really just check if the heading is rendered, if you have a blocking third-party JavaScript snippet in your head, you shouldn't, but very often, sometimes you must have it. End-to-end tests show you these kind of things. It just gives me as a developer the safety net that I need to ship good stuff. And I think that's why I'm a big fan.
100%. But now, Stefan, we wrote these end-to-end tests, in this case, like this test case locally, right? Let's maybe try to push it to GitHub and see how to execute it on the cloud. So that when you make more and more changes to your web application, which ideally you replace this with localhost and you spin up some environment in the cloud, but that this feature will keep working, right? So let's maybe push it to GitHub. So what I just did is like, here I navigated to the source control tab and I'm initializing this repository. And now it's basically the git init, and now I'm committing it and I'm calling it initial commit with all the files we just generated and wrote, and I'm publishing this branch, and I will publish it to GitHub, to the public repository. And this in the background, it will upload it to GitHub and so on. Let's maybe go to GitHub and look what is happening. So this is the repository. Let me zoom in a little bit. And here's the GitHub workflows file. So the GitHub workflows essentially is like the way how you give instructions to GitHub Actions. And let's look at it and see what you need to do in order to run your Playwright test on GitHub Actions.
Yeah, so it's I see we're doing things on main and master. This is just a default convention. What happens afterwards?
So GitHub Actions is a really easy way of doing things. So you just do, you want to check out, you want to have some node version, in this case 18, you want to have your npm dependencies, then something Playwright specific, you want to have your browsers with the dependencies, and then you already want to run the tests, right? npx Playwright test is essentially the command line version of running your tests, which we previously did in VS Code. And then something for later, we want to upload the artifacts, and the artifacts include some reporters. We will just look at it in a second. So these, yeah.
That would have been my next question. If I now run this stuff, right? For example, when I now run my end-to-end tests locally, I can follow up the browser, right? I can see something was off, the UI didn't reach the state that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But when I run everything in the cloud, in a headless, cloudy, whatever world, how can I debug what is actually failing?
Let me get a step back maybe. Let me just minimize this and go back in VS Code. So VS Code here on the testing tab not only offers show browser, it also offers show trace viewer. So trace viewer is a feature Playwright invented to essentially, let me maybe just use it and then I will talk about it. So I enable it here. I'm rerunning this Playwright test. Let's maybe use this default test for that. And it will also spin up a browser window. And yeah, so what is Playwright Trace Viewer? Playwright Trace Viewer on the left side will show you all the Playwright API calls. And for each of the API calls, it will give you a before and after and a during snapshot of the whole page. And this snapshot is not just an image or a video, it's a full DOM snapshot. So you can even pop it out and you can right click and inspect and look at all these kinds of HTML structures, CSS classes, and so on.
That is so cool. But it's we see way more things. What is there on top in the first row?
Sorry, what do you mean?
The images on top. What is there in the first row?
So yes, here on the left side, you see the actions. And for each action, you see at the top, timing-wise, where it was positioned. So the page go to, for example, it's right now highlighted. It took like 500 milliseconds. It's one of the longest things we did, right? And afterwards, we clicked, very short click, just 100 milliseconds. And this is what happened here. And on the right side, we check the visibility. So you can select here things, and these on the left side get updated and so on. But the most important stuff for debugging later on is here down below, these kind of information. So for each Playwright call, you get all the informations which was passed to the call. You get console logs, you get errors, you see how the node console behaved, and you see, most interestingly, the network request. So in this case, for example, that the VS Code PNG had this specific headers and these specific response headers, and also this kind of body. Yes.
Yeah, I found the few things that I found the most helpful here is the dragging along in the top timeline view, because this kind of limits what I'm looking at. And then what I find myself using very often is the network panel, because in my day job, I work on JavaScript heavy applications. And even though my end-to-end tests are user first, very often the issue is somewhere else, right? And usually it sits somewhere in the network. And it could be a failed network request. It could be some authorization problem. And the help that I get in the trace viewer, that I can limit the network panel to a certain time frame, can see what UI or Playwright calls failed, and I only then have to look at 2, 3, 4, 5 requests. That is just tremendously helpful, because a long end-to-end session can take a minute, 2, with hundreds of calls, with hundreds of actions, but that I can drill down and have everything right in front of me is super helpful when debugging nasty stuff.
Absolutely. So imagine how it was like, let's say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? You had end-to-end tests, absolutely. They were hard to write, but much more, it was hard to debug, right? Let's imagine something was failing in JavaScript. there was some JavaScript console error, but you only had access to either a video or a screenshot. That doesn't help, right? But Playwright offers you here to see all the console logs, to see all the network requests, and then you can find out that your backend request was failing with 500, and it had this response trace ID, and you can map it to your you can map it to your applications request and find out that something in the backend was going wrong, right? But
this is so true, right? So the applications that I work on, it's like when you have your end-to-end test suite running for the first time, you're testing the application and the backend more often than every developer did before that. And currently, I'm working on a project, and we are just creating hundreds of orders, run hundreds of customers, and I occasionally see 500s, right? My tests fail because they run at scale. They run 10, 20, 15, 20 times per day. And thanks to the traces that I get from Playwright itself, I just can create a ticket and it's like, hey, this request was a 500. Even when I would have discovered this request by myself, by testing things out, a reload is quickly done, right? I'm not writing or copying the things right away. And trace files and the ability to kind of keep all this information just helped the teams that I'm working with just to keep and debug backend issues all the time because the network information is available. Beautiful.
Yeah. Absolutely. So this is Playwright Trace Viewer, and you can get it locally by running your test. But most essentially, what we take a look now is when we go back to GitHub here in Google Chrome. Let me open this again. We see that here under the Actions tab, a test was failing.
Oh no.
Oh no, what did we do? And it did here the things we instructed before, right? Installing dependencies, browsers, and it was failing. Let's see why and what happened. Oh, there was something was failing. A heading with quick guide was visible. So here you already see some hints on why it was failing. Maybe you can make sense out of it. But for me, I cannot. I need more input. And for what else we offer you here is under the summary tab is we previously said we want to upload these reports, right? So let's just download the Playwright report.
Yep.
And I'm downloading it here right there. And I'm going back to VS Code. And let me go into the terminal. And what you can do here is like, first, let's try to copy it. I think it's like here, downloads. Nope. Let me move it here. Developer TMP. Azure JavaScript days. Here we go. And we will delete this before and we will extract it. So what we just did, we downloaded a zip file, we extracted it, and we can invoke now a cool special command. It's called npx playwright show report. And what this will give you is a report of the test we were just running on inside the cloud, inside Azure, and not inside Azure, inside GitHub Actions. And we see all the tests which we're running, right? We were running 9 tests. We were running 3 tests across 3 browsers, which means 9 different unique tests. And so we see this has title test, it has passed, get started link test, but there was this new test and it failed in Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit. Let's look at it.
Something is fishy here.
Something is fishy. Let's try to find out what's going on. So this here, the error is the same error as we saw inside our GitHub Action logs. That's already helpful. And we see all the retries. Each of the retries behaved the same. But if we go now, if we go back here, we have this special button, and it's called like Open Trace or View Trace. And let's click it. And this will essentially open the trace viewer like we did previously locally, but from a trace which was created on the GitHub Actions run. And we can go over the statements here, and we see everything was working correctly, but this to be visible was failing. And we see all these informations, as said before, we see this line. And finally, I can see that this element, we have a typo here. It's called quick Gaudi instead of guide.
Didn't check before committing, huh?
We didn't, right? And so what you can now do, for example, is either the element has updated, right? You can click here on the locator tab and you can generate a new locator for this element. and you have it here, and you can update it back in your source code, or you fix your web application, right? It could be either a bug in the end-to-end test or a bug in the web application.
For sure. Can people inspect traces when they don't have the Playwright binary somehow?
Yes. So what we just downloaded is the Playwright report. The Playwright report is what we call the HTML report. HTML report, let me go back, is this kind of view. So it contains all the details for each test, but they can also just download the trace file. And the actual trace file, you can go to trace.playwright.dev, and here you can just drop the trace file in, which is a zip file in the end. Let's just do this here. It's in the data directory. We have 3 for all these 3 browser runs. And if you drag and drop it here, you get the same experience essentially.
Yeah, I found myself in my team, we do that very often. We just collect the trace files, and then the team, because not everybody has the end-to-end setup naturally running, but everybody understands how to download a zip file and drop it into trace@playwright.dev.
Yes. What else you can do is, like, we have it shown in the Playwright dev docs. Let me go here to Node, and if you go to Trace Viewer, we have this open, I think, viewing the trace, I believe here. Yeah, viewing remote traces option, right? And what you can do here is, like, trace.playwright.dev. This is the website we just went to. You can pass your trace location from some storage location, like Azure's blob storage, and then it will fetch it in the background, and it will give you the same experience. Like here, it's fetching it from demo playwright.dev.
Beautiful. So we have this kind of trace viewer available in the HTML report. We can access it via trace playwright.dev. Is there another area where this is popping up, this view?
Yes. So we all started inside VS Code, right? Let's go back to VS Code. But imagine you have some engineers who are either not used to VS Code or don't want to use VS Code. We try to give them a nice experience as well, and we try to add a specific need, the need for having watch mode, and we combine this inside a feature or a small product of ours, which we call UI mode. So let's just invoke Playwright UI mode, and you can do this with npx playwright test --UI. And what this gives you is, on the right side, it will give you almost the same as a trace view offers, like all the actions, in this case normal yet, and like all the snapshots and the timeline and the errors. But on the left side, it will give you a very similar experience of what VS Code offers you, right? A list of tests and a list of projects and a list of browsers, and you can filter them. So let's maybe just run them. Let's try to run the has title text, and it passes in Chrome. And
this is all headless right now, right?
This is all headless right now, yes. So UI mode is a headless first application. So we give you the debugging experience inside this UI here, but the actual browser is running headless. So this means you can also go inside code spaces, for example, and run npx playwright test --UI-host with 0000, and you get the same experience. So you could run you can essentially develop Playwright tests inside the cloud completely without the browser locally, right? Except like opening UI mode, yes.
Nice. Yeah, I found myself, due to the watch mode, the way that I'm developing most of my complicated end-to-end tests is usually I start out in UI mode, because it allows me to quickly iterate and rerun the tests depending on what I'm doing. But then if it gets really complicated or I'm hunting a bug, I'm definitely first on the VS Code front because of the debugging abilities, and then I'm just switching over. That's my approach these days.
Yes. So you can enable watch mode here, and you can make changes, and it will automatically rerun. All right, that's Playwright UI mode. That's I think that were most of the features Playwright has to offer. Let's jump back to the presentation.
Covered a lot of ground, Max.
Yes, we covered the VS Code experience. We covered trace viewer. We covered the pushing into GitHub. We covered UI mode, right? Yes. So that was our demo. Playwright is fully open source and free. So most of our downloads are on NPM nowadays. We crossed, I believe, the 5 million mark a few days ago. The screenshot is outdated. And on the right side, you see our GitHub stores, almost 60,000. And join our Playwright community on Discord. So for anything question related, join there. We have a huge community there. They write blog articles and create videos. And here on the left side, you see our videos section. And that's also where you see Stefan at the bottom, where he creates some awesome Playwright material. Here's some more resources. So Playwright, if you don't know yet, cross-browser web testing and automation framework. All the documentation is on Playwright Dev. We are open source. And if you have a feature request or a bug, just go to GitHub. So all our triaging happens on GitHub. We try to triage in less than 24 hours. And follow us on our socials on the right side, on X, Discord, or YouTube. And thank you very much and happy testing. Thank you all.